And welcome to the Airgun Geeks podcast, where today we're going to discuss the tuning of the Avenger. We also have a special guest, Tyler Patner from Air Venturi, and Steve from AEAC, and of course my co-host, Adam. Now, you guys probably hear a little suspense and drama in my voice. Honestly, this is the first time we're doing a video, so it's very exciting. So I want to say hello to all of the AEAC listeners and fans. I'm also a big fan, and I'm rather excited to get to do this with Steve and Tyler. Adam, how you doing?
I'm good, Pat. How's everyone tonight?
Oh, I'm good.
Good. Got
Tyler's
thumbs up
doing
from
two
Tyler.
thumbs
That's
up.
half the battle.
So, Steve, how you doing?
Good. Glad to be here with you guys. Anytime I can get on YouTube with the product manager for Air Venturi and YouTube star of Pyramid Air Insyder, that's always a good day for me.
Stop, Steve. You're far too kind, my friend. No, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And I just want to say I like the format. I like this partnership. I think it's going to be great. And for the listeners out there that can't see things, maybe you should head on over to YouTube so you can actually get the visual experience as well. You know, I think this is great.
Yeah, if for my audience, guys, this is the first time the Airgun Geeks is on my YouTube channel, and I think Adam and Patrick, we're going to try to do this we're going to record the third Wednesday of every month. Mm-hmm. So whatever gun I happen to be working on, I guess you can catch that on the Airgun Geeks podcast, and we'll try to host somebody that's industry relevant, like Tyler Patner here, and get that on the vlog for you, and as well as record the podcast. Is that about right,
definitely.
Guys?
That sounds like a fantastic idea. And they come out every Monday. So Adam makes us all sound really good, and Steve, you're going to make us look really good. So we're excited about that.
Hey, for my audience, where can they find the Airgun Geeks podcast? Tyler, you'd be nice.
Well, technically, you can go to www.airgungeeks.com and find us there. You can find us on pretty much every platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeart. Just look up Airgun Geeks, and you'll see these geeky glasses with the tagline, "How geeky do you want us to get?" And just sit back, listen, have a good time, and have a couple laughs. Definitely, we do.
Cool, thanks.
So, Adam, I know you have a whole bunch of questions because you've been quiet over there. What questions do you have for Mr. Tyler?
So, actually, this one's for Steve first. Sorry, Tyler, you don't get the limelight this first one.
That's all right.
And actually, it's not an Avenger question, Steve. This is something that I really wanted to know. Forgot to ask the last time we talked, but you've done a lot of video editing. What software do you use?
I use a editing software called Cyberlink, and it's by a company called Power Director.
Okay, and you can find that. Is it free, downloadable? Does it work with any video format?
So, it's downloadable. It's not for free. When I bought it back in like 2014 or 2015, it was a purchase option only. Where Adobe, I think you can either buy it or lease it. Tyler's nodding yes. That sounds probably right. So today I can't say what programs they have, but you'll have to pay for it.
Okay. No, I was just curious because you look good and just wanted to make sure that, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
so
that's good.
All right. Now let's dive in. So the first one, and this is going to go to Steve first, and then it's going to kind of piggy into Tyler here. So when you were doing the bullpup in your vlog, you talked about the trigger not being as good or as light as the original Avenger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you attribute that to that big, heavy linkage that's in that gun?
I don't know what it's due to. On that linkage, the linkage itself actually felt really lightweight as I removed the stock and was manipulating it. I will say I was able to get the pup's trigger. You had mentioned not as light. I got it down to 1 pound 6 ounces as far as a break weight, a dependable, repeatable break weight. And I was really happy with that. The challenge was at the end of the pull, the break was more of a three or so millimeter rolling break, whereas in the rifle I was able to get that sear to just kind of snap. right away, if that makes sense.
It does. Now,
Mhm.
are you able to get there, Tyler? Are you able to get into that linkage and replace that spring? Or with that linkage, is it a ball bearing linkage? Because I know there's a couple different ones and I haven't taken one apart yet.
Sure. So the linkage is actually a cast like aluminum piece. So there's not adjustment to it. Like a lot of bullpups historically have some kind of stainless rod or something that you can maybe screw in and screw out to get some adjustment. This doesn't have that, but it does have two independent adjustment screws. One more for trigger position, which is going to help your length of pull, and then one that kind of gives you a little bit of spring weight, basically. The problem is that you don't have the adjustment back at the actual trigger box anymore, and that's where like that roll kind of comes in, where it's almost, I don't want to say it's impossible, because there's going to be some variance inevitably, with any lower end, less expensive pre-charged trigger, right? But in this case, like I have a gun sitting right next to me where it's just like barely any movement and it goes. Why it is like that, and some have that little bit of roll, it's just kind of like where the dice may fall, you know what I mean? But for the most part, you can adjust it to get it to be very predictable. That's a given. It's definitely not the same as the rifle trigger is in terms of the amount of adjustment you have.
So can I speak to that a little bit, T?
Fire away.
So what was interesting is when, at the end of the day, I wasn't able to argue with the scoreboard. The 50 and 100-yard performance was there, so the trigger was manageable. But what I found is that, normally I like to bring that blade up against the stop and slowly apply pressure while I focus like on my follow through and my approach and grip and all this other stuff, until the gun just kind of goes off. But I did experiment that way with the Avenger Pup, but I found that my best groups normally came by bringing that trigger as far back as it would go, like up to the stop that I had tuned into it, and then quickly kind of snapped through that roll while really focusing on the follow through. And in doing so, that's when I was able to get the 1-inch groups at 100 yards and the sub half inch at 50. Yeah, I actually went back and forth a lot, and I had some success actually at 100 yards, slow rolling it, but most of my success came coming up against the stop and then quickly moving through it while really focusing on that follow through, almost like a Springer follow through, and then trying to keep everything else the same as far as my shoulder, my cheek, my grip, my lateral weight, like all of those kinds of things. And if you guys are following this and you own an Avenger Pup, on YouTube's AEAC vlog, I shared my trigger settings up there so that you'd be able to duplicate the 1 pound 6 ounces with and it's a nice 2-stage. It's got a nice first stage take up that's light. It hits that wall, and then you've got a couple of millimeters of roll, and then it lets off. I'll also put those settings in the full review that'll be on my other YouTube channel, AEAC Home, when that comes out here in the next week or two.
That's exciting. I love what the Avenger can do. So, and those listening, you don't have to worry. We'll make sure we have all the links in the description, so you'll be able to find this, and it's definitely worth a watch. That's impressive. I do love my Avenger. So, but the one thing I have, the complaint I have, Mr. Tyler, is this thing is not left-hand friendly at all.
The bullpup, you mean?
The bullpup version, yeah. The wood and synthetic stock is great, but this bullpup one, I love the feel. Feels good on my right cheek, but not on my left one.
Yeah, the backwards people out there, the left-handers, that I have a great time offending, apparently. Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because, and just for the folks at home, like, I've had to explain this to some people since the gun came out, right? We have to make a distinction in the marketplace, or I like to make a distinction in the marketplace. You don't have to, but I do, between purpose-built bullpups. So, for example, like your FX Wildcat, right? That is a bullpup from the ground up, versus a rifle that is turned into a bullpup. Like your Avenger bullpup or like a Dream Pup, right? As an example, there are a lot of guns that are like that. You're not gonna get the forward cocking and some of those things that allow you to have an ambidextrous action. Although the Wildcats, even with the magazine placement, kind of that's iffy, right? But in general, like it's one of those things where you do have to make some concessions. And actually, we do have some lefties here at the office that don't have a problem with it. So I think it's a lot to do with the shape of your face. And it sounds stupid, right? But it's a fact, I think, with a lot of things. Like there are people that get along with certain types of guns or stocks that don't get along with others. And I do think that's a very real thing, but certainly it's not a lefty friendly action in the bullpup format, having the cocking lever right next to your cheek. Yeah, no doubt about that.
So,
And
I'm just. Go
Tyler,
ahead.
sorry.
I just have one question. Did you just say Patrick has a big head?
If you are putting those words in my mouth, Adam, I'm not going to tell you no. No, I'm kidding.
My mind's going down all sorts of dirty bunny trails right now. Reference Patrick's big head and Tyler's mouth, but we're not going to.
It's my cheekbones.
We're not going to open up that can of worms.
You just took that
But
to
hey,
a place.
That's fine.
Seriously
I'm the
on
bunny
that, Patrick. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Adam.
Go ahead.
The Avenger Pup's cheek piece, if you have like a taller head, is it's adjustable, of course, and it's very comfortable. But I found that even if you remove it and then unscrew the little adjustment peg, it's actually really comfortable on the cheek, and you can kind of get down lower. You can move from like a mid-profile scope mount down to like a low-profile scope mount, which is important because that Pup's upper Picatinny rail where the scope mounts is so high. It's like 3 inches above the barrel center line to begin with. So if some of you are looking at that, wondering how you can kind of get in there and get cozy to it, you can totally remove that cheek piece, and it feels fine because you're up against kind of like a beveled poly receiver with like a little 45-degree bevel on it, and it's fine.
Am I allowed to do visual aids?
Yeah.
Okay, so just so everybody at home.
But it may not show unless you click off your background.
Oh, hang on. I'm going to get it just right. There we go. Okay. So it's probably hard to see there, but there's actually lines. So you can take the cheek piece, take it off, and move it up and down a little bit within those lines, as well as to what Steve said, take it off completely and run it kind of the same way this piece is set up here. So you do have not only forward and back adjustment, but also up and down out of it as well.
But I was able to get it to run with mid-profile mounts and a 40-millimeter bell and the cheek piece for any of you guys that are wondering. So it's not like it's some big challenge unless you have a giant head like Patrick.
It's not. I was just picking on Tyler. Yeah, it's the really big thing is it is very adjustable depending on your face, apparently your cheeks. So and the other thing I like to say is I like the material that the stock is made out of. So how did you think of how it was made, Steve, compared to the other synthetic stock, the full rifle?
Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed. The stock to me felt much more expensive than hold on, I got a little pop up here I'm trying to get rid of. The bullpup stock, poly stock, felt like a big upgrade from the rifle stock, where the rifle stock was very lightweight. It kind of had that plasticky hollow feel to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The pup, while it's 9 inches shorter than the rifle, it's also 1.5 pounds heavier. So to me, they both had their merits, but just the quality of the stock, it felt like a much more expensive stock. It was solid. It looked like it was bedded really nice. It was definitely thicker. It didn't have that plasticky feel at all. It had more of like a tactical poly feel, like what you might feel on a Glock, that a Glock frame's made out of. And it definitely felt like Air Venturi spent a lot more money on it. And then, of course, it had all these fringe benefits that came along with it, like, the double mag holders on the bottom, the Picatinny on the fore end and on the sides so that you can add an accessory. The grip was phenomenal. And it's actually a really comfortable stock. It's ergonomic. It's not like overly fat like some of these brands that you see. It's like kind of nice and slender. Yeah. It's balanced out really nice. Just to me, it was heavy, and it had some flex in it. It had some flex. So there's like a little sub piece to the stock underneath that lower forward pick rail, and it's held in by a couple of tiny screws that you can see when you remove the rifle from the stock that actually wound up tightening up to help circumvent this a little bit. But you can kind of rock it back and forth, side to side, even when it's set up on a pick rail. So there's some flex in it. I honestly don't remember if I had that in the rifle or not, but I just remember the rifle stock feeling overall more rigid than the pups when I was trying to do my due diligence with it.
I'm trying to think back to that because I do remember talking to you about it. The one difference, and it's an improvement, one thing that we wanted to do with this was take the connection point away between the Picatinny rail like you have on the rifle stocks and the actual air cylinders and barrel shroud. So the actual barrel band on a rifle actually contacts, like that screw goes up through the Picatinny rail on the bottom of either the synthetic or the wood stock. And so by removing that, right, like while Steve mentions there is some flex there, it's going to happen. It's all polymer, right? It's not going to, it shouldn't rather influence anything as far as point of impact or play or any significant role in terms of influencing your barrel alignment and air cylinder contact points.
Yeah. So I should be more specific after hearing Tyler speak. It's not like you load up the gun on the bench or bag or shoulder and you feel flex in it. We're talking to the pup. It's a really rigid, it's a really rigid piece of kit, as the Brits would say. Where you do feel it is when you load up the gun on the bench, and if you get a little bit too much vertical grip in it, which is where you grab the grip and then the weight of your arm kind of pulls it down, you'll see your reticle start to kind of swing like on a pendulum, like this when you start looking at it 50 and 100 yards, and that's the flex at the bottom of that pick rail.
And you're talking about off a bipod. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, excuse me,
right?
off a bipod.
Yeah.
Now, to Tyler's point, it doesn't like end your game, but it's something that you have to master and then navigate in order to get the accuracy out of the gun, because in your follow through, it can definitely move if you don't kind of go through and exaggerate it. Like, you're not going to notice this much at 25, but when you start stretching out to 50 and 100, if you really don't focus on that follow through, it can get you. It got me, so I would presume, if I'm gettable, you guys are gettable, right?
So it makes it a challenge. No, that's good information. Yeah, because honestly, I haven't been able to shoot one. So I'm learning as I'm going too, and I will shoot one even though I am left-handed. But yeah, I like the storage, I like all that. The trigger felt good from the little bit I got to play with it. So yeah. And
I should
go on.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I also thought of something really important to point out that was really nice about the design. So when you go to load the gun, and I show this in the full review, I kind of demo this. You pull that magazine right out of the spare on the bottom. It's a really quick motion, you pull the spare out, you cock the gun, you slide it in, you forward, you go off with the safety, and everything's right there. And it's just really well designed in that regard. And it's also got a phenomenal single shot tray. So there was just a lot of good things going on with the stock. There was a couple of things that made it not as desirable as the rifle, maybe. Like to your point with the rear cocking was a little bit kind of old fashioned but now the rifle has the wood stock available, which I'm going to be upgrading my Avenger rifle from 2020. I will be upgrading to the wood stock, because now that I've shot them both and feeling this stock the pup stock feeling more solid, now I find myself desiring that in the rifle, and I want to upgrade the rifle, because I feel like it did some nice things to absorb vibration and frequency and harmonics and these types of things that can help you when you get into your tune as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Steve. I'll be upgrading mine. I do like the way they feel the wood one. Yeah. All right. Interesting. So, go on. What you got, Adam?
I'm ready to get into like the hammer spring, the regulator, and your 8 different tunes, because so I've got a lot of questions on that. But first, why 8 tunes? Like, you've got your high power, your low power, or Eco Pro and high power, or the American, the I want a lot of shots, and then the something in the middle. Sorry. Did I just go and put all of us Americans in the same power happy category? No, that's
I mean,
right.
it's
Tyler-
different here, so it is what it is. You know, our product is different than in some places in Europe, so it's all good.
So yeah, so why 8 different tunes?
So in truth, if you look at my Excel spreadsheet after I came out of the 2 weeks tuning the Avenger pup, I actually came out with 24 tunes. Actually 23. One of them was I had just recorded the OEM tune to know where I started at. But one of the tricky things about tuning is, and this is a tough thing to learn as an air gunner, but you can spend a couple of hours creating this masterpiece of a tune. Nice tight ES, nice tight SD, good harmonics to where it's clean and snappy, where you don't have a lot of air, excess air coming out behind the pellet or slug. That's going to, induce turbulence into the back of that slug or pellet. And, you've got good efficiency, and you feel like your velocity is spot on for where you need to be, with that certain projectile. And then you get it out to 50 and 100 yards, and the thing just won't perform. And so when I came up with all those tunes on the vlog, knowing that, not all these guns are going to be exactly the same, and everyone's hold is different, and everyone's ammo and barrel lottery is different, and everyone's weather conditions are different. I wanted to try to bring to the table just a good number of tunes to where the audience could just kind of get a feel for how to get to a certain place via attacking the hammer spring and reg settings. And so I just wanted them to have a lot of samples, if you will. But at the end of the day, and I ran into this a lot, and that's one of the reasons it took so long to film for this gun, is I thought I had these amazing tunes, in my backyard at 25, and then I got out to 50 and 100 and started running through different ammos, and I'd noticed that like a particular tune that should have done well was super sensitive to the wind, or another tune where I was overpowering the gun had a lot of waste air coming out behind the pellet or slug, and that was creating a lot of, it was destabilizing the projectile, and my 50 and 100 yard accuracy was going away. So there was a lot of trial and error, and if that answers your question as to why you need to really try so many. And harmonics, I even touch on harmonics, but harmonics is a big part of it. Vibration's a big part of it. The slickness of that shot cycle. Accuracy comes from all of those things when you're really trying to put pellet on pellet at 50 and 100. And it just took a lot of work.
And that was actually where I was going to lead that question too, because watching your tuning video, you really kind of completely ignored the sinusoidal wave that you get at the end of the barrel when you shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can have a massive extreme spread difference, but if your slower pellets are leaving at the top of that sinusoidal curve, they're going to be impacting the target at about the same location, if not the same time, as a pellet going faster that's closer to the center, the node of that sinusoidal curve.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously you don't want to have a pellet leaving at the trough because you're shooting into the ground at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, if in my experience, if you're inside, and this is just so hard, I think, for some people to get comfy with, because, we see 11 and 12, 13 foot per second extreme spreads with the guys that are on the podium at Pyramid Air Cup, RMAC, and EBR. But really, if you're inside of 20, 25 feet per second, you can be pellet on pellet at 100 yards, as long as, to your point, Adam, you have the harmonics there, you have the tune there, you got the pellet going the right speed for the wind, you're doing your part with follow through, and you've sorted your pellets for head size. Really, that's critical too. And I saw actually a lot of that with this Avenger, because the pellet manufacturers are susceptible to the same COVID crazy the rest of the world's been going through over the last 2 years. And I've never seen the batches that are coming. I've never seen more varying head sizes than I've seen now. And you can do everything perfect at 50 yards. And there was I got a great sample of it on film. And you can put 4 out of 5 in the same hole at 50, and one strays like an 1/8 inch out of the hole. And you did everything right. That's normally pellet head size.
Mm.
Okay.
So
I
these
forgot
tunes
I
sound
forgot
like,
if I even answered your question.
You did, and thank you.
Okay.
yeah.
I got on a
So
bunny
sitting
trail.
back listening, this sounds like what your purpose is the correct tune. If you're just going to be out to 50, then you can just use those and try those instead of trying to push it out to 100. So, because we get a lot of people that I talk to that are like, "Oh, I'm just shooting 50 yards or less," and then whatnot. So that's a lot of information.
Well, at the end of the day, if I can tune the gun for 100, even though I'm shooting for 50, I'm always going to do that because Patrick, the 100 is the ultimate measure on if you have the stability there,
Mhm.
the shot cycle there, the waste air, and if you've got the speed right for trying to navigate wind. Because if you can get into that 1-inch area at 100, then you're going to be a lot less susceptible to those external variables like hold, head size, wind, destabilizing your pellet, the waste air, all that stuff at 50. But to your point, I mean, yeah, you don't have to. It just really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like, are you trying to make it work with a third, in the case of the 25 cal that I was able to review in the pup, are you trying to make it work with a 34 grain? Are you trying to make it work with a 25 grain? Are you trying to make it work with a 26, 27 grain slug? Are you trying to make it work with a 26 grain Hades? Like everyone kind of wanted their own tune. And then we're even finding now that with these Avenger 25 cals, some of the barrels are going to like the JSB 34 grain variants and some aren't. With mine, I was a little bit handicapped because my barrel on the 25 pup only liked the JSB 25 grain variants at 50 and 100. At 25 yards, it liked the FX hybrid slugs, it liked the H&M Barracudas, it liked all of the JSB 34 grain variants, all of the JSB 25 grain variants, but as soon as I started getting out to 50 and 100, all of that totally changed on me. I discovered that I had a barrel that absolutely, regardless of tune, regardless of harmonics, I mean, I was even playing around with the FX harmonic barrel tuner at the end of the day, trying to get it to work. The barrel just wouldn't shoot anything outside of a JSB 25 grain variant. Everything would destabilize. So, but then getting on the internet and reading the forums and looking at some other YouTubers, a lot of guys and gals have been able to get their 25 pups to perform with the JS 34 grain. So, it's just going to kind of come down to that barrel lottery.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, to your point, right, and coming back to what Steve just said, you have this gun that does a lot of crazy stuff, right? In the world of sub $500 guns, it can be set up to do a lot of different things and do them pretty well. But at the end of the day, it's a sub $500 gun, right? And we need to, that's really important. If you're shooting 50 yards and in, I'm confident that you're not going to really have any issues with the Avenger. Finding the right pellet is going to be the case regardless, and you may have a barrel that shoots a bunch of different stuff well. But if that is to Patrick's point, your purpose, 50 yards and in, pest control, what have you, you're going to be able to tune this gun to a place that's really nice, really happy, gets you some decent shot count, and blast critters, pretty much at will at those distances. It's when you start to stretch things out that you start to see a lot of the difference. And the reality, like I said, is that, at the price point, you're not going to get FX day state level consistency, like those high end brands from gun to gun. And I could tell you that they're good. So when we got the first batch of bullpups in, I took a bunch of them out to 45 yards, and I'm able to stack pellets, just off the bench with whatever the factory tune that's on them is, right? And if a gun doesn't shoot 25 4s that well, it shoots the 33 9s, or it shoots H&M Barracudas at 45. And some of them will do, shoot them all well. But, some of them are definitely more particular.
Yeah, to what Tyler's saying, if you guys are on the podcast or new, or if you're new here on YouTube, if you go back to 2020, I was able to review the Air Venturi Avenger rifle in 22 cal. 2 videos. That barrel liked everything at every tune. it performed at 50 and 100 with the Eco Tune, the Pro Tune, the Power Tune. It shot all the JSB pellets well. It shot all the H&N pellets well. It shot H&N, it shot the FX Hybrid slugs well. It shot the Nielsen Specialty Ammo slugs well. At 50 and 100, like, that barrel liked absolutely everything. And I couldn't make it go wrong. And, and I tried. so I got lucky once and, I don't want to say unlucky once, because still the 50 and 100 yard performance was there for me. I just had to work extra hard for it. And that might be a message, before you turn your gun in for warranty, you just might have to work harder to get the results. And by harder, I mean experiment with more ammo, start doing some pellet sorting, start really making sure your tunes are spot on to where your tune hasn't induced instability into the pellet or slug as it's leaving the bore, and all these sorts of things.
So I love how you guys went down that road. It was perfect, because that was the whole point of my question, and I'm glad it went where it went, because how many people are thinking, oh, well, my gun's broke or this ain't doing it, but we're all having different experiences, and that was just chock full of information. I
and
that's great.
And Tyler talks about a $400 gun, and it was $300 when it came out in 2019 or whatever. But the boutique brands aren't immune from this. They're just not. Lothar Walther, for sure. Just in getting to know the manufacturers over the years, it's not uncommon for a manufacturer to buy 600 Lothar Walther barrels. When I say manufacturer of an arm, a high-end air gun, and throw away 2/3 of those when they do their testing before they, batch column for the final results. And and FX is the same. Their barrels aren't immune from imperfections, but that's what warranty is for. You can get a bad barrel, and these companies are great and they'll stand behind you. I don't know how it works with Air Venturi, but the message I'm trying to bestow upon your audience is just before you take that final step to warranty. I mean, believe me, guys, I've been there. I've been super frustrated. I felt like throwing the gun in the pond, regardless of what brand it is, on numerous occasions. But I found that when I stuck with it, I found that either two things. One, it was something that I could correct with ammo, state of barrel cleanliness, or tune, or I found it was something that I was doing wrong, and my hold and my approach and the way I was addressing and moving through the trigger, this sort of thing. So
I will say there's something I really want to say in this kind of context, in that it's really important to understand this is not just for Avengers, this is for everything. And I see this all the time with guys that buy new field target guns. They want to shoot 20 foot-pounds in the hunter class with the monsters, right? Well, not every barrel is going to shoot JSB monsters well. There are some barrels that are going to do it better than others, but let's say you buy an air arms gun. This is not a guarantee that you're going to be able to shoot monsters well. Now, I can guarantee you that you're going to shoot 10-3s well, right? But the monsters are going to be a little hit and miss, and that's partially because maybe that gun and that barrel is designed around a specific pellet. And we see that with a lot of the high-end stuff, and that is not any different with the Avenger, where, when you look at, not look at, I can tell you because I know, the barrel is designed around the 10-3 JSB and 177, which actually I've had better luck in most of the guns with the monsters. In 22, it's the 18 grain JSB, and in 25, it is the 25-4. I remember talking to you about that, Steve.
That makes yep.
But
I remember coming to you being like, dude, this thing has an appetite for one thing and one thing only.
Yes. But here's the thing. If you want to shoot 33-9s, you may get a barrel that is able to do it, right? If it doesn't, that doesn't mean the gun doesn't shoot, right? And I think that's the important thing to come back to, is that, we as air gunners, and I think, Steve, you've done this a lot, I'm sure Pat and Adam, you guys have as well, you get a gun, you have to learn what pellet it likes. Right. And the difference in Steve's process versus probably a lot of people's is that he's going through and doing a lot of these tunes, right? And figuring out where these pellets are performing well before stretching the legs, where I know, like myself, right, I'm going to go out and see, I'm going to shoot it at 50 yards before I start to mess with the tune, right? I want to get a sense of what the barrel likes. And 25 shows Steve a lot. But it's not the whole story, as we found out with this bullpup, right? So I think that's an important thing, right? It's not just what's your purpose, but it's also there. You do have to. I don't want to say bend to the will of the gun, but like the gun's gonna wants what it wants sometimes.
It does, and I feel like this is a good time to kind of distinguish between, everything that Tyler was just mentioning. But if you plan on going to compete at Extreme Bench Rest, the Rocky Mountain Air Gun Challenge, the Pyramid Air Cup, at the 50 and 100 yard, forget it unless your gun's going to shoot the 34 grain JSB and the 25 cal and the 24 grain JSB and the 22 cal. And that was one of my struggles with a 25 cal pup. It would only shoot the 25 grain, which made it really, really challenging for me at 50 and 100 yards. I really had to work hard to film around the really, really high wind days. For example, I had like 20 days of 15 to 25 mile an hour winds, which was ridiculous. It's another one of the reasons I've been 8 weeks on this gun. And I found myself going out there when winds were forecast to be 5 to 10. And I would be lucky enough to shoot between 3 and 6 at 50 and 100. But even at 3 in a 3 to 6, I was seeing as much as an inch or two deflection at 50 and up to 3 or 4 inches at 100 yards with that 25 grain shooting optimally, where I know if I were able to get the gun to shoot a 34 grain JSB optimally, that would have really come down for me. And so I would say for 99% of people, the 25 grain is going to be great. It's going to do everything you want. But if you expect to be in the money at the 3 big events here in the US annually, you're going to need that redesigned typed pellet to get, Tyler's got. I'm being challenged.
No,
Airgun challenge.
No. It's not a challenge. I'm going to say this. Steve, you're right. Please, for the folks watching and listening, do not let that dissuade you from going out to one of these competitions.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the difference, right? Like, to be honest with you, perfectly honest, I've owned a hell of a lot of air guns. I would not expect somebody to win or be in the money with an Avenger. I'm blatantly honest, right? You may be able to do it. You are a far better man than me if you can, or woman. We had the Cup a couple of years ago. Some folks made it to the final with like gauntlets, right? Like slightly modified gauntlets. What is now the Gauntlet 2, basically. That shocked a lot of people.
I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
I was going to say I want to add to that, and in being able to film those 3 events annually, you will see Avengers and Gauntlets competing at those events. Out of 150 men and women, at the end of the day, there's going to be, 5 or 10 people that are on the podium strung across, each one of those half a dozen or more events, right? So it's definitely a culture at all 3 where everyone's rubbing elbows and helping one another, and it's just a really fun place to be. It's a fun place to learn. Even if you're not shooting, it's a great place to be there and be able to talk to everyone and share stories and share experiences. And even when you go, you're going to see a lot of competitors helping each other out, not only on the sidelines, but on the firing line. They'll be on the sidelines discussing wind, discussing ammo at a certain velocity in the winds we're seeing today, what they've done to either back off or accelerate the velocity to be able to navigate to 100 in that wind with that load. You'll see guys and gals with broken guns and people from other teams coming to help them. So it's not like this thing where if you have an Avenger, you shouldn't go. I'm merely pointing out that if you want the $20,000 first prize, you're probably not going to get there with a 25 grain 25 cal. You're going to need a 34. You're going to need it shooting a 34 grain. Because in Arizona and in Utah, the wind just goes left, right. It's in front of you, it's behind you, it's swirling, it's different in every one of the 100 lanes. It's insane. And it's different across all the different heats throughout the day, which, you kind of draw for. It's a lottery. And so all I'm trying to say is if your expectations are to get in the big money, come prepared to shoot that heavier redesigned pellet in the 22 or 25 cal or the 30 cal if you want to win big money. If you just want to get on the podium, maybe win, have fun, learn, compete, by all means, get out there with your gauntlet upgrading your Avenger because you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But honestly, if you're there for the money and that's the reason you're going, don't.
Okay.
You like that's fine if it
So,
draws
Adam.
you in, but if you don't stay for the camaraderie, there's something wrong with you. Like that's what's so great to Steve's point about all of these events is that you watch people from different companies, whether they're in the industry or not, or different teams, or people that have never done this before that show up with everything from a gauntlet to an FX to whatever. And just get taken into this kind of like familial friendly environment. And that's what it's all about, man. Like I've been always really impressed that the money doesn't affect the camaraderie and the kind of general feel of these events. If you're a person where that's why you're there and that's why you keep going back, there's probably something wrong with you. Because if you don't get taken into that, like, it's about seeing people, it's about the experience, it's sharing that experience with your friends. Like that's what all of these events are about at the end of the day, and the money is just like gravy for the small percentage of folks that are going to be in that position.
It is, to Tyler's point, by far one of the coolest things that going to these events is you get to talk to the manufacturers. And in a lot of cases, I don't mean like just some factory rep. I mean like director of engineering, owner, director of marketing, research and development, and you really get to learn. You also get to talk to all the YouTubers who have their hands on all of these guns, like all of the time, and really have a good kind of context of the playing field and what you need to get where. But that all being said, you're going to see Benjamin Marauders on the firing line. You're going to see Benjamin Armadas. You're going to see lots of spring guns. You're going to see Virows. You're going to see Dianas. You're going to see lots of the different Hutsons on there. You're going to see several people shooting Gauntlets, several people shooting Avengers, lots of people shooting Air Force. So, you don't need to spend huge money to go and be competitive and be in the money. I want to say at the most recent Extreme Bench Rest, with like a 10-year-old Air Arms S410, I forget the guy's name. He's so nice, and I'm so embarrassed for forgetting his name. But he took like second place in the speed silhouette, and he missed first place by like a fraction of a second. And this was like an old bolt handle Air Arms S410. Yeah. So, you know who I'm talking about, Tyler?
I don't know the name, but I remember seeing pictures. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm so embarrassed for forgetting. But point is, go and compete, because even if you don't know what you're doing, the event itself is going to do a super good job of explaining and helping you and making sure you know, and not only in the beginning, but as you go. And so is everyone else there that's shooting against you. So it's just a really, really nice place to be. If I wasn't in this, like filming and doing all this other stuff, I would go just to learn and be around other air gunners and to get to know the manufacturer and learn from them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that is phenomenal conversation. I mean, that's like my whole hobby 10, 11 years ago when I started, is when I first met you, Steve, and just how helpful and learning tunes and whatnot and all of that. So I know we have a lot more we want to know about the Avengers. Adam, what else do you got?
So actually, I've got an important question. We spent a lot of time on the really heavy pellets, but there is a big move, or there's a lot of questions and concern about shooting lead-free pellets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Steve, did you have any experience with the lead-free? Tyler, you on either one of the Avengers? Because it's a question I get very often, particularly as like states like California are moving to requiring more lead-free ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
So
you want to go, Tyler, or do you want me to go?
Have at it, man.
So I will say, generally speaking, if you go back to when I started AEAC in 2014, I've traditionally shot in the videos at 50 and 100 yards the Predator GTO alloy pellets very successfully. That has been, as a YouTube reviewer, I always look for pattern in the ammos, because the pattern, I'm always going outside, of course, and checking and rechecking and trying to verify around the pattern, but the pattern almost always holds true across all the major barrels, the Lothar Walthers, the Hudson barrels, the FX Smooth Twist and Smooth Twist X barrels, the Chinese barrel that's in the Avenger. They all have a tendency to really do well with the Predator GTO alloy pellets, and I feel like one that, because that's a JSB product, and they're made so uniformly, but because they're a harder material, the skirts and the heads stay the size they're supposed to in transport, and you just get super, super good consistency and accuracy out of them as long as you can get the speed right. Couple of challenges with them is when the winds are up. When I say up 1 to 3, you're going to see big drifts at 50, and you're going to see even bigger drifts at 100. And it's going to do kooky things with headwinds and tailwinds too. But for inside of 25 yards, it doesn't really matter what the wind's doing. So if you want to go shoot where a backdrop's a concern, or if you're shooting on the, sorry, my dog keeps going to say hi to me, or if you're shooting like at the dairy and cows are a problem, or if you're inside the barn and you don't want to put a hole through it, they're excellent for that. Now, answering your question, my luck with them, with the Avenger, was that I couldn't get them to perform with the Avenger, but not because I don't think that the barrel didn't like them, but because I couldn't get the gun dialed to the proper foot-pounds to be successful with that load. So I remember when I was reviewing the 22 cal back in 2020, I couldn't get that gun to shoot really well below like 23-ish foot-pounds. I couldn't get a tune to hold together, I should rather say. And to get the GTO to the right speed, I would have needed a 22 cal that could shoot well at around 18, 19 foot-pounds of energy from memory 2 years ago. Now, I had the same problem when I reviewed the 25 cal pup over the last month, is that gun liked to run between 43 and 57 foot-pounds. That was its sweet spot. So I wasn't able to get a lightweight 25 cal Predator GTO to run at 43 foot-pounds and have like the lowest, flattest tune I could get out of that gun was around 42.5 foot-pounds. Below that, the reg setting, I didn't have enough. I shouldn't say that. I had enough reg setting, but I didn't have not enough hammer spring setting, if that made sense. With the hammer spring dialed all the way to minimum, I needed to be able to bring that down, be able to bring that down even more to match a reg setting of like 1800, 1900, 2000, 2100 PSI. And I had too much hammer spring. So the gun was really just optimized to run between 43 and 57, not around 38, 40, if that makes sense.
So that actually is great because one of the questions I have for Tyler, the hammer springs in the 17, 22, 25, are they all the same?
No.
Can you put the 22 or the 177 hammer spring into the 25 gun?
Sure.
So then you could potentially actually get that hammer spring low enough to do that.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, to Steve's point, the gun is very much made for the American market. And when I say that, I go back to Adam's point about being power hungry, right? It's more tailored for the kind of mid-power, or what I think Steve would consider a pro tune level. I think we call it the same thing for our tune services, and thank you for lending us the name, Steve, a while back.
Sure.
And more of those high-power tunes, right? Like that's where the gun shines. It does not lend itself well of the way it comes from the factory to the lower-powered stuff. And on the lead-free topic, actually, there's something interesting that Steve didn't hit on, but he knows. I know he knows. You look at those GTOs, right? What are they designed after?
They look like a JSP Diablo.
Exactly right. It's the same physical design as a 25-4, and I believe the 16 grain JSP, not the 18.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
So like when you look at, and I think at 177 they're made after the 10-3s. But with those 22s and 25s, if your barrel, regardless of brand, I'm talking about everything, my experience, and we have the benefit of for the Pyramid Air videos of doing everything inside, so I don't have to deal with wind. When we do that from a pure accuracy perspective, they are very, very close to those pellets. Not always, because to Steve's point, you push them too fast in a lot of guns. But if you have the ability to adjust that, or if your barrel likes those pellets, you can kind of count on to 50 yards those lead-free GTOs doing quite well. Also, without wind considerations, because that screws everything up when you talk about a lightweight pellet. But the hardness of that pellet, I think, plays a factor in it not necessarily being as consistent in all guns, if that makes sense. Because you really are having grind on that material. And I think what you inevitably do is create, in the wind and outdoors, you create like greater wind sails for that wind to catch as that pellet's flying through the air. It's one of the reasons, like if you look at, and this is I'm going to do a little rabbit hole thing here, why poly barrels are so intriguing, and why smooth twist liners and barrels and the Axe liner system are so intriguing, because when you look at a pellet, if you push it through, you're not cutting grooves into the pellet. When you cut a groove into the pellet, as that pellet's flying through the air, the wind is catching those. And if it catches that little, just at the right time, that little groove, that creates a wind sail, and you get this drift, and you're like, whoa. But when
you bring up such a great point here, T. Like when you follow the professional shooting circuit throughout the United States, the guns that are always on the podium at 100 yards are always the FX Smooth Twist barrel and the Daystate Red Wolf with their polygonal barrel.
I think the raws with the poly
and the
barrel.
raws.
As
Yeah,
well,
and the
right?
raw with the polygonal. These guns, I mean, to be competitive in that environment, you have to be able to put 10 on 10, 10 for 10 on a dime at 100 in just insane winds. And that is, it is a wind game. And that is a competitive advantage to those barrels. And I mean, I'm trying to think, I think I've only been following it for 4 or 5 years, at least for the YouTube channel. And it's always those two barrels. Raw's traditionally done well at the 25 and 50, but when you get out to 100, it's almost always that Lothar Walther polygonal in a Daystate, or that Smooth Twist or Smooth Twist X in an FX.
Yeah, and it's important to note as well, though, that we're not talking about, like what Steve's talking about is not pure accuracy, right? It's wind predictability and consistency of drift, right? So you have to be able to call that wind drift on a instant. You know, if you see that wind doing the same thing down the line, that's when you see guys go to town at these events and they start sending them, you know, where they get that confidence of, I know what the wind's going to do. Well, guess what? You may not be able to do that to the same degree or with the same precision that you with a like traditionally grooved LW or, you know, whatever barrel, pick a manufacturer. And that's really where that poly barrel and those Smooth Twist X barrels really have, in my opinion, an advantage.
I think there's a lot to that. And I saw that, Tyler, with your bullpup when I was out filming, especially when I was filming at 100 yards. It was kind of funny. I had a good left to right that was about out of my 7, 8 o'clock. So I was going a little bit high, a little bit of elevation, a little bit of push to the right. And I shot a sighter, and my sighter kind of all grouped, you know, center, right. And so I aimed at the left target when I went to film, you know, on an 8-inch disc, there's these little red dots. I aimed at the left dot, and it went right in the red dot. And I was like, shit, fired it again, went right in the red dot, fired it again. I started speeding through them, and I wound up with like 4 out of 5.5 inch at 100 yards with your pup. And then one just brought the group up to like 3/4 of an inch. That was with one type of pellet, but traditionally I was inch and a half. But the wind was just so profound of a factor, especially when I was trying to shoot with, because with shooting we haven't even gotten into the tuning yet, but shooting a 25 grain at 870 to 878 feet per second, which is where I found the sweet spot for this gun. That's where it had the most wind resistance and flew the straightest, but also running so low and being such low velocity and being such a light round, that pellet is really going to move. It's really going to move up, down, left, right, just depending on what the wind's doing.
So with that said, let's talk about tunes. Is that where you're going, Adam?
Actually, I had one more question on power.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Haven't been really inside the Avenger or the Avenger bullpup. So we talked about going with a lighter hammer spring. How about putting spacers in there to get more usability out of that regulator?
Spacers in behind the hammer spring, you mean?
Yes.
To add preload?
Yes.
I mean, you can, sure. I haven't honestly experimented with it too much because, like in a 25, to be able to get 57.
Can you guys hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Loud and clear.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody just came home. Like
Either
That's
Katya
okay,
just
we all
got
got
back from her
dogs.
walk with
Well,
her
except for Adam.
girlfriend, or So we have 3 dogs.
And here I
know
thought
Katya,
Tyler's
Katya
dog
just
was
came
gonna...
in. I heard her open the door.
No, I'm at the
She's
office,
the
man.
she's the alpha wolf in our family. So when she goes home, the dogs lose their mind.
Yeah. All right. So
Sorry. Everyone just kind of went.
Hammer
I
spring.
thought for sure you could hear that.
All right. So you can do it. Quite frankly, I've always been relatively impressed with the power output of the Avenger, right? Like if you look at what people are getting at a max power in 22 and 25, I think if I recall correctly, Steve, I think you were in the low 40s with the 22 back when. And
20, yeah, 43 on the high end and about 23, 24 on the low end with the 22. And they both performed.
Right.
At
And
50
you're and you're talking about 57 is what you topped out at with the 25, right? Which is it mirrors pretty closely to what I've seen as well. And there is some variability. There you will see people that do happen to get 59, 60 out there with the 25s, but that's pretty good power. I mean, if you think about the affordable PCPs that are out there, right? You have what is now the Gauntlet 2 that is built to be a powerhouse and a powerhouse only. Nothing wrong with that. You know, but everything else for the most part is in the maybe 45 range. You know, so for something to be able to be adjusted up to 55 plus, I think is pretty darn impressive. I'm a heavily biased opinion though. So
I'd agree.
I
I'd agree.
want to add for Tyler. I capped out at 57 foot-pounds because I refused to push the reg past 2,900 PSI.
Yeah, sure.
I have a feeling that if I maxed my hammer spring out and moved that reg to 3,000-ish, I might have been able to squeeze 60, 61. I've seen some reports of that, 62. But for me, it was a moot point because pushing the gun that hard, the tune was phenomenal. It sounded good. It looked good on paper. But my 34 grains were coming out like curveballs and knuckleballs. Not at 25. At 25, it was great. I was seeing, pinky nail size groups. But then as soon as I moved out to 50, I just went, wow, because you could see the hook and the hook and the hook or the wobble, 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 wobble. They were really being disrupted, which tells me there's so much extra air coming out behind that pellet to just try to get it to 850, 860, 870, that it may not be a great choice for the Avenger 25 cal. If that makes sense. Like some guns will allow you to, they'll allow you to run 55 foot-pounds in a 25 cal, but their guts are designed, so to speak, to where they don't need so much air to do it. Maybe it's a longer barrel, maybe it's a dual transfer port, maybe it's got a plenum on it, whatever it is, to where that air, if you picture the air rushing down the barrel, that air just kind of stops right as the pellet. It gives just enough air to get that pellet out, and then it stops rather than enveloping it. If you picture like a black powder rifle going off, like boom, with all the smoke that comes out around the musket ball, there's a difference there. And to get the Avenger 25 there, I had that. And so, I'd be very curious to see what other people's experiences are at 50 and 100 with the 34 grain, running 55, 60 foot-pounds. I know if given the choice right now, I'd be all over the 22, just because I could make the 22 work with the slugs. And they seem to be a little bit less susceptible to that when I was tuning that gun. Hey, bud. Another dog visiting me.
Quick question for you, Steve. And I don't remember from your video, what moderator were you using at 25 yards?
The new Donnie FL Fat Boy.
Okay.
Ooh, the Fat Boy.
So,
yeah, the new Fat Boy. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because I recently on a couple of Facebook pages and then taking a few phone calls and talking to a few people, they've been trying to shoot the 34 grain JSB using a Sumo and a Tanto, and we're getting clipping in the moderator where they didn't with the 25s or with a 26 grain slug. And so I'm just wondering if it is coming out so much, even at the muzzle, that's what was causing the clipping.
Using an extender, like
with an extender.
Yeah.
Yes. I've seen one.
I can speak to that.
Okay, please.
So one of the neat things about the Donnie FL system for the Avenger is it has a really good barrel adapter, because the Avenger doesn't come with 1/2 inch UNF threads. that you need to put on a moderator, but you can buy as a separate accessory the adapter, and the adapter threads in the front, and it actually envelops the front of the barrel with a pretty tight tolerance, so it centers it. Now, the Fat Boy is short. I'm looking at it over here on the shelf. It's about that long. The Sumo was one you mentioned. It's going to be a couple inches longer. And was there another one you mentioned?
It's about 6 inches long.
Yeah, about
And
6
the Fat
inches
Boy's
long.
about 4.
Yeah. And when you overpower the gun, remember that pellet can come out it's doing this as soon as it comes out. So by overpowering the gun, you can actually get clipping in the moderator. Like I found that moderators are very sensitive to the speed and the power and the waste air. And you can take that same moderator, that same pellet, bring down the speed in the amount of breath you're pushing into it, and the clipping will go away. So it's not always alignment, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
And if you do have clipping, one of the great things about looking for the box over here, I can't use it because my camera is sitting on my Donnie FL Fat Boy box, but it comes with several different air strippers or apertures, if you will, a 17722, 2225, and a 2530. And if you get in clipping with one, you can always go to the next size. Now, that being said, I ran the 2225 on the Avenger at 57 foot-pounds, and I didn't get any clipping. But that might have been because of that shorter Donnie FL Fat Boy.
Sure.
And I will tell you, that is all the moderator you need for this gun. At 43 foot-pounds, at 57, it's dramatic, the sound difference. Even if you go with the 2530 aperture, it's still a huge improvement.
That's crazy. That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Back off the speed for that if you get that clipping on something like a Sumo or a Ronin, something longer like that. And a lot of times it'll go away.
But I want the power.
Because you have to tune for the moderator, just like you tune everything else.
Valid point. Tune for
Because
the
you got a lot
moderator.
of things inside the moderator that are either going to disrupt or make it better.
Correct.
Make the stability better, and you got to tune for it.
And if you go to a different moderator that you tune for, you'll change your POI and all sorts of stuff. Big
Time. You'll change the stability of the pellet. I mean, the POI is one thing. POI we can deal with the scope, but you'll have a pellet that's going like this, and all of a sudden it goes woo, and you're like, whoa, what the hell just happened? All I did was change the moderator. That's it.
Great.
So, tuning. The actual functional dynamics of your tuning, because you've got 23 tunes, 24 with the OEM standard. And that's a lot. You figure if you tuned that much and you've got what, six turns in your hammer spring, and if you say it's functionally 2100 to 2900 psi, that's basically covering almost every increment of 100 with a twist in that hammer spring. That's a lot going on.
It is, anytime you're tuning, you're searching for those nuggets of where the gun is nice and relaxed in its shot cycle. You don't have an excess of air coming out behind your pellet or slug. And and you're really just looking for a spot where the hammer spring and regulator pressure like to be together. That's all you're doing when you're tuning. So don't be afraid of it.
And to quote you from your vlog video, if you're getting shark teeth or alligator teeth, you're really close, but not quite there.
Yeah, you're close. It means that your hammer spring and your regulator pressure, they're in a pretty good place of balance, but you either need a little more or less hammer spring or a little more or less regulator. And that'll usually smoothen that out. And by that, I mean, it could be like an eighth of a turn, a sixth of a turn on that hammer spring, a tenth of a turn on the hammer spring. It could be on that regulator, the smallest little bit that you're able to crack that screwdriver and kind of have that tactile little crack, when you move it. I mean, you're right there.
And for those that haven't seen Steve's video yet, when we're referring to alligator teeth or shark's teeth, when you're shooting over a chronograph, you'll have one shot or two that are at a higher velocity then your next couple of shots could be at a low velocity and it's just bouncing back and forth, where you're not having either ascending or descending or just completely cattywampus. Like you're close where you're within, double digits that are like low 20s, but you're not looking at something like a 40 or a 50 extreme spread.
Yeah, like I can probably show you 2 examples of this. Let me find the eco tune here.
Yeah, Steve. For the
So
folks
I don't know
at
how
home,
well this is going to show up on camera. No, it's not going to show up because my face isn't with it.
Well, you disappeared, Steve.
I know, I'm trying to make it work. Oh,
There you
There
go.
you go.
see it?
Yep.
So Steve, can you tell people how, like, when you do your graphs, right? What's
Yeah.
the spread of speeds? Because this is going to change the perception that people have, right? Like when you're talking about shark teeth, what are we actually talking about in terms of velocity change? Because a flat line, when you're looking at something spread on a graph over 50 or 100 feet per second, looks a hell of a lot different if you're looking at 20 feet per second.
It's the difference between a standard deviation of 3 and 6. If you have a standard deviation of 6, it means you're getting like those heartbeat jumps or alligator teeth or whatever. If you have a standard deviation of 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, that's really going to smoothen out for you. And that has less to do with accuracy and more to do with like a smoothness of a shot cycle, which lends itself to consistent accuracy.
Thank you. I appreciate you telling people that, because it's important. Like if you start, I've noticed this with people's perception of a shot string when we do our chronograph strings and videos. When a gun is super tight, right? When you have that 2 or 3 foot per second standard deviation in a gun, and you're only showing them a chronograph like slip that goes between 860 and 840, right? Because it's right at 850.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It looks different, and they don't necessarily see on the ends that it's only within that 20 feet per second. And they're like, well, that looks awful. And you go, you didn't read.
Let me amend that. Try to put this where my face is. Hold on. Come on.
You're getting there. Hang on.
Come on, you dirty dog. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
This over here. Damn you. There's always 200 feet per second over here.
Yeah, good.
This is always a 200 feet per second spread in everything that I do.
Good.
And if it's not,
Just so our
it's because
listeners
I've
know,
made a mistake.
Steve's trying to show. Steve's trying to show a bar graph, and his background keeps blacking it out and showing his background, and it's cutting his face off.
I was trying to make it work by holding it close to. Because if you get your face in there, it works. See?
Yeah, that's good.
There it is.
Yeah, that worked
so
perfect.
there's the 200 feet.
Yep.
Those little bumps are, you're seeing that's like a 6 SD standard deviation, as opposed to there you go. There's a 3 SD right there.
Wow.
See how it smoothens it out? That tug of war between hammer spring and reg pressure is really kind of settling into a good, sweet zone.
Now, how many this is rabbit holing. How many shots did you take? I know, Tyler, it's my habit. Did you take, or what was your break-in period with the gun before you started recording your shot cycle? Or shot string, pardon me.
Not a lot, a couple hundred pellets. Well, so the OEM one, very few, like 50.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So yeah, basically out of the box and you went to go for it. Check.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to see, because you need the tune to kind of figure out. You need to make sure you're running in the right speed and at a relatively good frequency and shot cycle before you go culling for pellets at 25 or 50, because the results won't be there if your tune's all cattywampus. So you have to have the horse before the cart, so to speak there. But to your point, Adam, break-in is a very real thing with regulators across all brands of airgun. They do get better after 2, 3, 4, 500 shots. They do settle in. I've seen that consistently in and out.
I'm glad you bring that up, because this question is specifically for Tyler. Tyler, reg creep on the Avenger platform. So is that let's define reg creep as in the 10, 20 minutes I'm shooting, I'm watching that regulator creep from a set 2100 to 2300. versus a creep from 2100 to 2200 over the course of a week?
Well, okay, you shouldn't be seeing that while you're shooting, right? When you're cycling the reg, if you're taking 10 to 20 minutes between shots, that's a different thing, right? But if you're talking about while you're shooting, it should be cycling back relatively close to the same place.
Yep.
Now, reg creep in my mind, right, is the second example you gave, where the time span doesn't matter so much, right? But if you let it sit for any preset amount of time, right, whether that's a half hour or 3 days, right, and that reg goes from after you shoot it to, let's say 2200 is where it normally is when you're operating the gun, and when you come back to it an hour later, if it's at 2400, that's reg creep. Okay.
Well,
do we agree or no?
We agree, but then I have another question with that. So a phenomenon I've seen, at least with a bunch of my guns, is that my first shot that I take, if the gun's been sitting for anything longer than a couple of days, I will have a different point of impact than the subsequent shots. And I've gone so far as to test this and getting different chronograph results over versus what my previous averages were, and then shooting afterwards having the same average velocity and expected results that I did before.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you define that? I call it, in powder burning world, it's cold barrel.
Yeah. So there's some stuff, there's a lot to unpack there actually. So depending on where the gun is tuned, and this is any gun, that's regulated, that amount of creep, whatever that is, right, you're going to see it over a chronograph or potentially on target, distance dependent, of course. If it's very significant, if you're talking about 500 foot, PSI of creep, you're going to see it regardless. Okay. But if your reg, again, not just Avenger, but any gun, if your reg creeps 100 PSI, you may not see that depending on how your gun is tuned. Now, if you're running in a fine line between power level, let's say, just to use this as an example, right, like 45 and maybe your next bump up would be like 47, 48 foot-pounds, right? If you're running at a fine line like that and your hammer spring is maybe a little, maybe like 3-4 turns in, you might see that more significant jump in velocity at a smaller PSI increment. But in general, if you're tuned in, as Steve was just talking about, like a harmonious or a happy place, you shouldn't really be seeing that for 100 or 200 PSI. That first shot out of the box is probably going to be fine. Now, if you have more severe creep than that, the recommendation is to always, blow one off before you walk out into the woods or what have you, right? And just because that'll reset that reg. And this is something you, in my experience, have to do. Like if I pull my Thomas field target rifle out, there's a humor regulator inside of that gun. If I haven't shot it in 2 weeks, I'm going to get a different velocity that first shot, maybe the second shot as well. But that first shot for sure is going to be off of where my norm is. It's not significant, right? It's like 10 feet per second. It's not drastic, but it's something, right? So yeah, it's clear that reg, cycle that reg, get it back rolling again. But it's something you should be paying attention to when you get that gun. It's not a death sentence, right? In terms of function, it's just something you have to be aware of and understand that you may need to cycle your gun, cycle the reg rather, by dry firing the gun or putting a pellet through it before you go out and sit down on a bench or head into the woods.
So if we actually have reg creep as an issue where we're watching it in the 5 minutes, 10 minutes of our between shots, is there any quick and easy fix that the user can do? Can we pull the reg? Can we flip that Delrin? Can we lubricate it? I see Steve's head's all over the place. Is it yes, no, leave it, I got it, okay.
Doing a bobblehead over here.
Yeah. I'm like, that spring's going for broke there, Steve. Be careful.
So
I made myself dizzy. Hold on, I gotta hold on to something.
There are a lot of things you can do. If they're going to be useful, who's to say? And I mean that very, like, as sincerely as possible. It's not a joke. offhand, you can lubricate your regulator, which in the case of the Avenger would require you pulling it out of the gun. You can make a small adjustment to your regulator. I've seen with some guns, they seem to settle in a bit more at like 2400 PSI, where they may have been creeping a little bit at 2100 PSI.
Bingo.
It's
That was
kind
my
of goofy.
bobblehead right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you can also, if it's creeping regardless, one of the things that I've recommended to people, there's and I don't have a reg out of a gun here, there is a little Delrin seal at the top of the regulator stem that you can pop out and flip over, right? That's an easy one. If you have maybe a little bit of damage, or if where the reg actually, where that seal touches the action inside the gun, if that's become worn, you can flip that over to the fresh side and probably solve some of that issue. It may not, but you could try it. We can, of course, send you a new Delrin seal, and we're working on getting parts kits, out there and available, which should be happening in short order here for those folks that have had, a gun that's 2 years old now and need a little refresh kit. So we're working on that. But yeah, those are offhand a few things that you can do to try and mitigate it if it's happening, because it doesn't
Thank you.
always happen.
Thank you.
Wow.
Learn something
That's
new
a
every
lot.
day.
I've
Yeah.
played with this gun in a whole hell of a lot of ways, man.
Wow.
So the only question I have actually left
Well,
is
hold
less.
on. Do I get to go on Reg Creep?
What? No,
Absolutely
wait. You
not.
don't get
Nope.
No.
no.
I have
You
so
get the
much.
bobblehead,
I have
you're
so
good.
much to contribute on Reg Creep that my head's spinning.
All right, go, Steve. I'm sorry. That's
I was being a gentleman. I didn't want to break Tyler's thoughts, so I just sat here and was quiet,
I appreciate that.
being a good listener.
Steve. The floor is yours. Please tell me Red Creep, because I would need to know everything.
So, Reg Creep for me has been such a fascinating topic over the years, in just trying to understand what it is, what about it is important to people, the user, and then how much of it actually matters at the end of the day. And I've found like different answers to all of those questions. Like, I remember the first Avenger rifle that I reviewed. I had to warranty that one out from Reg Creep because I was getting like, I don't know, 300. No, I was getting like 400 PSI
more.
overnight. It was a lot. And I warrantied it out, and the replacement's been perfect since I got it in 2020. And I was able to finish that review. With this Avenger 25 cal pup, to Tyler's point, I was getting 200, 250 PSI reg creep overnight. And if I just let the gun sit an hour, I'd get, I don't know, 25 PSI, running reg pressures of like 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. But as soon as I got into the 24 through 2900 PSI, that overnight reg creep turned into like, 100 PSI. And my hourly reg creep turned into like, 5 or less. It was just.
How are you seeing that, Steve? Tell people how you're seeing that,
I-
or how
I
you
use
think
it.
you're seeing that.
I'll
more
show you.
appropriately, please.
I say 5
You can-
PSI. I'm
you
like,
can see
what
me
gauge
doing
do
this
you
in the
have?
video. I look at the gauge.
He's got a
I
magnifying
look at the
glass.
gauge
So
like
Like,
that.
I got like, you understand, like, do you know?
I was
I'm gonna have to do this. Like, that gauge is, whew, like, good luck,
No,
right?
dude, like I'm out there tuning like in my backyard like this, or I
Yeah.
take the phone and I put it in camera mode and I like whoop and I like take a picture to see where the hell I'm at. And I talk about that in the full review. You need to have like Superman vision to.
I feel like this would be you'd be the perfect person to get one of those SecMets or one of those Keller gauges and swap them all out and just leave it and forget it. Because hey, I don't care about what the factory gauge is doing, kind of, but I do want to know what the gun is doing. So
Well, you would see it in the Avengers. You would see it in that first and second shot. You would see, depending on where you were in the tune, either a 15 or 20 foot per second spike in velocity, or a 15 or 20 foot per second increase or decrease in the velocity, to Tyler's point, depending on what tune and where you are in that tune, for sometimes 2 shots. And in kind of down that same bunny trail, these Avenger regulators, if you want that reg to take a good full breath and really be seated in, give it a solid 10 seconds. 12 to 15 is even better. If you shoot every 5, it'll take like maybe 8/10 of its proper breath, and your velocity will still be good and consistent as long as you shoot every 5 seconds exactly. But if you really want it to fill its lungs to full capacity, settle in, give it a good 10, 15 seconds, especially when you're tuning the gun and you're seating the reg into where you think you want it to be for that tune. Now, to your point, Adam, with the SecMet, that was a very interesting addition to my tuning arsenal. I remember when I first got it for tuning the Maverick, the FX Maverick. And I remember seeing like overnight, like a 5-bar increase because it's digital.
What gun are we talking about?
The FX Maverick.
Okay. Oh,
yep.
Sorry.
Yep, it's okay. And then the next day I would go to shoot it. And also to Tyler's point, my velocity didn't change. So it depends on the gun. It depends on the tune. I know with the Avenger, when I was 200 and 300 PSI higher than where I should be, I was definitely getting a 15 to 20 foot per second difference in that shot one, sometimes a second shot, but I could be out there through the day, take a shot, 10 minutes later, pick up the rifle, take a second shot. But that could be a problem for a competitive shooter, for a hunter shooting out at distance, 50 and 100. It's not going to matter so much at 25 because your point of impact is going to be like an 1/8 inch, where that at 50, that turns into, 3/4 of an inch, becomes a problem. But, and I've seen reg creep in all sorts of different, like the FX guns will do it a little bit overnight. Again, depending on where you are in the tune and how much pressure you have them loaded up with. Some of them creep a little at the higher pressures, some creep a little at the lower pressures, some don't creep, at all, and some creep, and it doesn't matter that they creep. So there's a lot of confusion out there with reg creep. I feel like there's a new customer will buy an Avenger, they'll see that their reg increases by 200 PSI overnight, and they'll be like, oh my God, I need to warranty this thing out. You don't necessarily need to warranty it out, because is it shooting well at that tune anyway? And if it is, you may be able to retune it to a higher reg pressure, get that reg to seat, and you're happily ever after. Like with that 22 cal, I was able to get that reg to seat and not creep 1500 PSI.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great point. It's and from a customer perspective, I understand why it is of concern. I totally get it. Part of me, like the crass and I can't think of the right word. It is escaping me right now. Some part of me wants to be like, be happy you can see it. Because there are so many guns. How many regulated guns are there on the market? Tons, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't have that second gauge. How would you know?
Yeah.
You could sit there and play with that gun and let it sit for 10 minutes, let it sit for an hour, bring it back up the next day. Like, I have 30-year-old regulated PCPs, seriously, at home.
Yeah.
Do you think they don't creep? They creep.
They do. And I remember before the window into the regulator came to be, I remember and I would see it. Like, I'd see that first shot be different. And I never really understood why. And then when we were able to start seeing into what was happening with the pressure that the regulator was showing the valve, then I was like, oh, that's why, because it hasn't totally seated for that duration of time. And this came to my mind specifically to the Avenger pup. So I had 2 Avenger pups. I had to warranty one out because I stripped out the stock screw. My fault. But it wound up being a stroke of luck, because the regulator I got in this replacement gun was a little bit better than the reg that I had, where I did my 20 of 24 shot charts. And I redid a couple of them to ultimately film at 50 and 100. But that first regulator, it would show the valve. Like, for example, it would show the valve, let's say at a regulator pressure of 2300 PSI. It would show the valve 2300 PSI consistently from 4300 down to 3100. And then from 3100 down till it fell off the reg at 2400, it would show it 100 PSI less. And so I'd get you'd get these shot charts where if you look at them on AEAC vlog, the tuning guide I did, there'll be this long, slow descending thing with like a standard deviation of 4 feet per second, but a good extreme spread still of 15, 20, 25, whatever is perfectly good for 100 yards. And then when I got that replacement gun, that phenomenon went away for me. And I was able to turn that 4 SD into a 2.5 SD, and that 18 ES into like a 13 ES. So there'll be a little bit of a lottery with a $300 or $400 PCP, in the barrel you get, the reg you get. But what I'm trying to encourage you guys is don't go straight there with your line of thought in your anxiety. Spend some time with the gun trying to tune around it, because in a lot of cases you can get that reg to settle in by either breaking it in or running a little bit higher of a reg pressure, or even a lower reg pressure. You don't know where it's going to want to just sit and be fat and happy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways around it without feeling like you got to warranty your gun out.
And that's actually an important point too. Like, take the time to break the reg in. If it creeps a little when you first get it, it is what it, keep shooting, right? There were a couple things you just said, man, that I really want to touch on. One thing to note, the plenum on a Avenger is relatively small by comparison to many of the popular, $2,000 PCPs that are out there in the market today, or even the $1,000 stuff, actually, I should say. So you were talking about a 12 cc plenum, roughly. The Maverick, as an example that you brought up, right? 89 cc's of plenum volume. That's the chonky boy of plenums on the market right now, as far as I know.
I think the Wildcat's even bigger. I think the new Wildcat's like 105.
Nope, same size.
Nope, same size.
Is it 89?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What
But
about the Impact? Is it 89?
72.
No, 72.
72 and the Crown
I thought that the
69.
latest Wildcat literature press release that just came out, it's on my Facebook, shows that plenum is bigger. No.
No,
No.
it's basically a Maverick.
Yeah, it's like a Maverick on a Wildcat.
All right, I stand corrected.
But it's okay. All that aside, and all that to say, 89 cc's of volume.
Mm-hmm.
You are, first of all, you're not using all that on every shot, right? So any slight pressure changes are not going to be as impactful with that much air volume. And temperature changes are not going to be that impactful with that much air volume. One thing that I know from playing with converting like super high-end 10-meter PCPs that have zero plenum, like they do have a plenum, but it's like 1 cc because you don't need a lot of volume to produce 500 feet per second. But when you push those internals up into like 800 feet per second velocities, you start to see some things that you wouldn't if you were, in an indoor environment, right? Like a field target gun sees 40 degrees and it sees 90 degrees or higher or lower, whatever. And with that little volume, a 20-degree temperature change outside changes your velocities drastically.
It does anyway, regardless of everything. 15 degrees outside is going to be 15, 20 feet per second.
But it's going to
10 feet per second at least.
But it's going to take a lot longer for that to happen with an 89 cc plenum than it is 12 cc's. So these are all things like as you get more experience with different guns that you'll kind of get like a little attuned to. But yeah, like by comparison to some of those things, like the Avenger is not built to be like a Maverick, obviously, right? That's ways out there. But with the 12 cc plenum, like some of these things that you're bringing up, Steve, like you're going to see them, like temperature changes, so and it's going to be more impactful if that reg does creep a little bit, potentially, again, depending on where your tune is. These are all things that are part of the learning process for somebody with a adjustably regulated gun, or adjustable regulated.
That's huge, Tyler. I didn't know that. That's wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That does.
Good point.
Let me write that down. That's a good one. That's good stuff. Dang.
Good one, T.
Well, you get real geeky on that one there.
Dude, I got to tell you, man, I think, Steve, you and I have had this conversation before about the amount of people in the world that get to see as many guns as we do. Like that's probably my favorite part of my job is getting to touch and feel and sometimes review and shoot a lot of different guns out there. You get to see some of these commonalities across like similar feature sets. And the crazy thing for me, from a perspective of somebody that's been doing this for like a decade now, man, like regulated guns have been around for 30 plus years. Let's start there, okay? Every regulator on the planet is adjustable. The degrees to which you have to go, or the lengths to which you have to go to adjust them, is drastically different. So for us to be in a place in the market where there is a $300 to $400 externally adjustable regulated PCP is insanity compared to when I started and you started, Steve.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why when I first heard of the concept of the Avenger, why it was so intriguing to me. I looked upon it as because by that time I had done maybe like 1 or 2 tuning guides for FX, where now it's like 5 or 6 or something crazy like that. In each guide that you complete it's like going to college, for being a tuner. You come away learning so much. And that's what I loved about the Avenger, is it's so tuner friendly, and the results are so good. And by that I mean it's easy to tune a good ES and SD, and it's easy to find a velocity that you're targeting and get your line to run there. And it's just such a good trainer, but also it's so exciting because it's a gun that you can get to perform. Now, granted, you're going to need to work a lot harder behind the trigger and in time invested in your tune to get it there. At least that's been my experience. But it's a gun that at the end of the day really has a lot that it can contribute to its owner as far as their learning curve and helping them get over their fear of tuning, which I see all the time in the comments. People are so afraid to tune. They don't know how to start. They're afraid they're going to break something. They don't understand the most very basic concepts of balance. Like they'll come on after watching a tuning guide on my YouTube videos and they'll say, "Can I take your exact tune and apply it to my gun?" And that just tells me right there that I did a bad job of helping them understand the basics of tuning. What tuning is all about. It's not picking a regulator pressure, picking a hammer spring, and then putting it over here. It's about so much more. It's about getting the speed right. It's about getting the waste air right, getting the harmonics and the frequency right. It's about getting the shot cycle clean. All of those things, it's about really finding that harmony and balance inside the air gun at the velocity that makes the pellet or slug work. And just find those little meeting in the middle points, that common ground between regulator and hammer spring. That's those little nuggets and sweet spots.
I always like to say when I'm talking to people and I'm talking about this, is each gun has its own little personality. It's like, my gun does this, so, we'll even go to the extreme. So FX with the impact. Well, yeah, you put that on 3 and the macros on the micros on 3, your macros on 16, and it gets you in the ballpark. You still got to play with it because your barrel's different, your spring's different, your area, all of it. They each have their own little personalities. And then I'll go and give that gun to Tyler, and it's different. To Adam, it's different. To you, Steve, it's different. So the tuner is also being tuned with that gun too, the way they hold it, shoot it, all of that.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's that approach. How heavy is the shoulder? How heavy is the cheek? How much lateral force am I putting on that grip? How much am I squeezing the side of the grip? Am I working through that trigger break quickly? Not quickly. Those are those. Man, if any of your buddies, guys, tells you that a PCP isn't hold sensitive, tell them whoever told you that is having fun with you, because that is not true at all.
Yeah, it's different, right? And standards are different between people, right? So I may be able to group just as well as you, Patrick, with your impact, at the same distance, but maybe our points of impact are going to be different, right? Because our interface is a little different with the gun. It's stuff like that you pick up on when you shoot a lot of different guns and you play with a lot of this stuff. But there's like an anecdote I want to throw in here, going back to Steve, what you said about how this is a great almost training tool to
It's a
learn
great
about airgun
trainer.
tuning.
It's a good
Mhm.
trainer.
I
Mhm.
took one of our employees recently through tuning an Avenger because conceptually, this person could not wrap their head around how you could achieve the same velocity, or let's power, in this case, same thing, setting the gun up different ways, right? So we did
Oh,
it,
yeah.
right? I said, set the reg at, let's say, 2000 PSI, jack the hammer spring as far in as it'll go. And we worked up to it, right? So I said, let's start with the hammer spring all the way out and let's see what that velocity change looks like as you go one turn or a half turn at a time. And we did. And I said, okay, let's look at the shot count. Let's look at the consistency of this gun, right? And we looked at the chronograph string and it looks awful, right? When you get it to that maxed out. Now it's shooting 900 feet a second in 25, and that's a good number, right? People are like, that's good power. I'm happy with that. But the numbers are bouncing, right? And the shot
Right.
count's garbage because it's wasting air. You're hitting that valve so hard for the reg pressure that's on the other side of it. And I said, okay, let's flip the script because it's easy to come back down with this gun in terms of adjusting. I said, all right, let's go to a super high reg pressure, like more where the guns come at from the factory, and you pay attention, right? The gun sounds different, it feels different because you have all of this pressure now coming through that reg that is snapping that valve closed really quick. And now all of a sudden you need more hammer spring to push it open and get yourself some more power through the shot string, but the string still looks bad, right? So now I said, okay, well, let's watch this string and where does it fall off the reg? Well, it doesn't fall off the reg in the traditional sense because you get to 2500 PSI and all of a sudden the velocities go up. And this was like this aha moment for this person. They were like, whoa, now it's behaving like any unregulated gun. And then, okay, now I know where I need to tune the reg for, right? So it's learning those things. And this is such a great way to learn that, man. Oh, and you don't have to, I understand that for a lot of people, it's the first PCP and it is a decent amount of money. I get it. But by comparison to those $1,000, $2,000 guns, this is such a great outlet to learn how to make those adjustments and not be scared of the potential outcome.
Yeah, I've long pondered the best way to try to relay this to an audience because it's such a complicated thought. But probably the best one I know to date, the best way to know how to say it, is you have to picture like a body of pressurized air, right? And then picture your valve kind of like a Pac-Man trying to take a bite out of that body of pressurized air, right? And then behind your valve, you have this hammer spring, which the tighter you make the hammer spring, the harder it's going to hit the valve. Well, if you have a relatively low pressure body of air over here, which is being controlled by your regulator, when your hammer hits the valve, it's going to take a big bite of that air, okay? But because there's not a lot of force on it, there's that bite of air that it takes is going to wind up being kind of inconsistent. Think of it kind of like a floppy kind of action. But then when you raise the regulator pressure to meet that hammer spring tension where it's at, then you get kind of like an equal force. Now when that hammer smacks that valve and that valve opens into that higher body of pressure, it's got some force back on it. So that tends to speed up this action over here. And when you can speed up the action of that valve opening and taking those gulps, you wind up with a more consistent velocity. The air that comes up through that transfer port is the same each time. And all you're doing is trying to get the regulator pressure to meet the hammer spring tension where it's at. So if you have a low regulator pressure, you want to run a low hammer spring tension so they kind of have harmony with one another. If you're running a higher regulator pressure, you want to run a higher hammer spring tension so that tug, there's always a good balance in that tug of war. Now there's all sorts of little kind of bunny trails you can get down as far as fine tuning that, but that's the basic concept. You're just trying to balance out that force within the gun. Does that make any sense at all?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I think everybody here is in the initiated category, so I think it's going to make sense.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Hey, Adam, you're wearing an Air Venturi hat?
I was gonna say thank you for sending that to me, by the
Yeah,
way.
man, absolutely. Well, we gotta keep you as covered as possible.
I'm
I saw your
trying. I
mouth.
really am
I just saw your
trying.
mouth, Adam, by the way, a second ago.
Sorry.
So, Adam,
Oh, there it is again.
having an engineering background,
Yes.
do you know what an Air Venturi is? Because it's not just the name of a company.
No, I know it's an actual phenomena where air starts coming back on itself, but I can't accurately describe it anymore. I could if you'd asked me.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say about 12
Yeah.
years ago.
It's a phenomenon that happens. I'm probably going to butcher this explanation. You can Google it. There's a bunch of great videos out there. High volume, low pressure, getting choked through a restricted port creates a high pressure, low volume situation. It's the exact way an airgun valve, most airgun valves work. I shouldn't say all because that's not accurate, but that's the way most PCP valves work. Look it up, folks. It's an interesting thing and may give you some insight into how the laws of physics inside of your airgun or your PCP are playing out. Just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah.
Something good to study on.
It's a tug of war in there is all it is. And
Yeah.
you want to balance out those forces. And when you do, you'll get a nice flat shot chart.
Well, is there anything else that we need to add to this conversation of the Avenger, whether it's bullpup or rifle?
I thought we were just getting started. Do you have any
Getting
more
stuck-
questions, guys?
Actually, we've tapped out all my questions. I had my 2.5 pages, and we've hit them all, and then some.
I do have something I'd like to throw out there, like
Sure.
from the not work related per se, more as the air gunner in me has been really happy to see. One of the reasons that a gun like the Benjamin Marauder, as an example, has been so popular for so long is because not only when it comes to market is it really a breath of fresh air, revolutionary, innovative, all of those things, but the market as a whole really comes together around the product and creates an aftermarket for it. And I think that is so important for anything if you want it to be long-term successful, especially in the airgun world anyway. I can't speak for other industries, but
And it wasn't all that way. It wasn't always that way.
Mm-mm.
right,
No.
right. One of the things that I've been so happy to see as somebody that's had a hand in the Avenger behind the scenes is how many people have come out of the woodwork to put things and attachments and doodads and bells and whistles onto the Avenger. And like Anthony Bonacci, who is we're in Cleveland, Ohio, for folks that don't know here. He's from the Columbus area, and I met him a while ago at a shoot. And he had some ideas and was building this. I have one here, so I'll show you. And I turned it into my little project gun, I guess. I don't know if you guys can see this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn off my background if that's okay.
Yeah, do it, man.
Oh no, we're gonna get to see the headquarters. Dun 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 dun.
It's
Oh,
white walled. So this is my like Avenger carbine, and Anthony builds this chassis system for the Avenger, and I have this awful grip on here, and
That is super cool, though.
but it's so awesome, and it just slaps right on. Now
Mhm.
I've gone ahead and done 2 short tubes versus the long and the short tube, and I cut down the barrel, cut the shroud down. Have a Donnie extender on there and one of those FX hollow tube moderators because it's nice.
What about that barrel band? Is that OEM?
No, this is actually Anthony's as well.
That is gangster,
It
man.
actually
Look at that
goes
thing.
around the OEM barrel band. So it is the OEM band, but with this kind of addition in a little
Mhm.
pick rail section.
Mm-hmm.
But this thing is so awesome, and it still allows you access to all of your, adjustments and stuff. This is awesome, man. This is very seriously. This is exactly what when we first started selling the Avenger, this was exactly what I wanted to turn the gun into, right? Was this little tactical carbine thing. And Anthony's given people an outlet to do that, right? But you look throughout, and he also has the bullpup kit. I don't know if you, Steve, you haven't seen this, but he has a forward cocking bullpup.
The quick shot, isn't it?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Adam. Super neat. And like, he's not the only guy doing that. There's a bunch of guys making aftermarket high capacity mags. I've seen a bunch of bottle adapters out there like
Bottles,
this.
yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that is so cool to see. And one of the reasons I love the airgun world is because you get people from all different backgrounds that jump into a gun and go like, holy crap, this is awesome. I can make it better, because let's be honest, nothing's perfect. And nothing's perfect for everyone. And for people to be able to go out and make it their own, I think that's so cool. Yeah, that's my 2 cents, man.
No, that's a valid point. Yeah. There's a lot of Facebook groups that I'm part of that are strictly Avengers.
Yeah.
And it's like, look what they did here. You know, one guy made a little shorty. It's a little shorty bullpup. I saw it. I was like, what is that?
It's a buddy of mine out in California, actually. Yeah.
It's pretty slick. What were you gonna say, Steve?
Oh, just that we should give a shout out to Crawford and Lipt and Donnie FL and Saber Tactical. These are 3 companies that have worked their ass off over the last 5 years and spent huge money, like literally worked their ass off around the clock to bring us excellent products for a lot of the competition guns out there. And you know, it's just, we didn't always have that. And then when that was born out of those 3 companies, it just upped the level of, you know, one's ability to go and compete. But I, you know, kind of like had Tyler had a closeout. I wanted to discuss one of the most common questions I get around your Avenger, Tyler, or any of these tuning guides is, you know, where do you begin on a tune? You know, where do you start? Because there's a very basic concept that people just don't understand. And so I just wanted to share how I go about starting a tune, and maybe that'll help someone in the audience not be afraid and maybe have a better understanding of a way to navigate through it. But what you can do, and what I like to do, is basically you can pick any regulator setting that you want and then go in search of a hammer spring setting that works with it. Or you can pick any hammer spring setting that you want and then go in search of a regulator pressure setting that works with that hammer spring setting. Because eventually you'll find a crossing point where your velocity will get really, really tight. You know, you'll stop bouncing all over the place. So for example, I could pick a regulator pressure setting of randomly 2200 PSI on the Avenger. And then I could back my hammer spring totally out. And then I'll fill the gun up to maybe like 3800 PSI. You don't want to be shooting really low PSI. You don't want to be shooting really high, because weird things can happen when you're tuning it high and low. I try to kind of run a gun like the Avenger, let's say 38 down to 2500, and just search in that window. But I could pick a random regulator pressure, say of, let's say 2300 PSI, back the hammer spring all the way out. And then, you know, take like 5 shots and see, is my velocity doing this or is it doing this? Then I'll move that hammer spring, tighten it up by a quarter turn, take another 5 shots, tighten it by a quarter turn, take another 5 shots. And eventually what you'll start seeing is your velocity get really tight. Now, your velocity may wind up getting tight at 820 feet per second when you wanted to get it to get tight at 870. And that's the whole art of the tuning. You gotta pick a regulator pressure or a hammer spring and try to find where they meet to where they have harmony with one another at the velocity you're seeking with a certain pellet. You know, going about that another way, you know, on Tyler's Avenger, so to speak, it has 6 rotations of hammer spring. I can go right back it all the way out and then go right to 3 rotations, so I'm right in the middle. Take that reg, back it all the way down to like 18 or 1900 PSI, And then I can take 5 shots. If my velocity is doing this, I can bump that reg pressure 100 bar, 50 bar, take another 5 shots. And I keep doing that until eventually you'll find that harmony, that balance point with that hammer spring right in the middle there, to where your velocity will stop doing this and it'll start doing this. And again, it's either going to be at 880 when you want to be at 860, or 820 when you want to be at 850. So that is really all you're doing, tuning. Now, how do you go about figuring out, well, before I say that, I should also say that when you're tuning the regulator on the Avenger or any gun, it always takes a good 5 or so shots at least for that reg to settle into its place. So when you tune it into a spot, take 5 shots with a good 5-10 seconds in between to get that thing to really settle down. I dry fire the gun. I'm not going to waste ammo doing that. Sometimes I do just out of a curiosity, but normally not. So that's really important. And that hammer spring will also sometimes take a couple of shots to settle in. Normally 1 or 2, not like 5 like a reg. But I've seen that consistently across all the brands that I've tuned. The other really big thing to understand is, what velocity range am I trying to get the gun to perform in? And there's a lot of misinformation out there on this. The FX guns and the typical Lothar-Walther barrels like to be with a Diablo-shaped pellet, regardless of caliber, like to be 850 to 880, call it. That's where we'll typically see the best stability. I'm talking 50 and 100 yards. You can get away with 890, maybe 900, but what'll happen is at those higher speeds, depending on the barrel and the caliber, you can start to see some destabilization in your pellet. Now, when you get into like the Lothar-Walther polygonal barrels, those barrels tend to like more speed. With the Diablo-shaped pellet, more specifically the redesigns, they'll shoot 900, 910, 920, 930. They'll shoot well, those pellets in 2225 out to 50 and 100 yards in high winds. You see that in a lot with the Red Wolf, Daystate Red Wolf finishers, where the FX guys shooting the smooth twists, you'll see them trying to get away with 880, 890. But if the winds are too high in competition, you'll see them dial back to 850, 860, and then start putting pellet on pellet with redesigned style of pellets. Now, slugs I've seen, like, I haven't found a rhyme or reason to slugs yet across the barrels. Like, just kind of sharing with you what I've seen over the years. I've seen H&N slugs perform out of a Lothar-Walther and an Air Arms at 50 and 100 yards at 750 feet per second. And then I've seen a Nielsen Specialty Ammo slug perform out of a Lothar-Walther polygonal and a Daystate Red Wolf at 50 and 100 yards in 177 caliber at 1,250 feet per second. The FX hybrids are really popular. So are the JSBs. Those hybrids are a little bit different because they have a hollow core and the leads around the outside. So I almost always see those stabilize out between 950 and kind of 980, right in there, regardless of barrel or caliber. Where the Nielsen Specialty Ammos and the JSBs and the H&Ns, you can get away with, it might be anywhere between 750 and 1,200 feet per second, just depending on the tune, the barrel, the conditions, these types of things. So those are all kind of things that I use just kind of going into a tune, as far as where I mentally know that I want that velocity to be. But the biggest thing I want you guys to take away from this is, when you just approach a tune fresh, have a velocity in your mind that that pellet or slug should work well with your barrel. And you learn that by getting on the forums, getting on YouTube, just having some general knowledge. And then you attack that tune. You attack that tune with a path that's going to take you to that velocity. So basically, you're trying to get that reg pressure and that hammer spring to intersect, let's say, at 875 feet per second, because that's where I found the Avenger Pup 25 cal wanted to be with the JSB 25 grain variants. Not 870, not 878, although it performed well there. The real sweet spot was 875. perfect example was with those JSB Hades. I was running the original AEAC Pro Tune with those Hades 26 grains. And even though the Hades slows down so fast between 0 and 50 yards, much faster than any other pellet or slug, it's almost like it's got a parachute on the front of it. It didn't want to be 880, 870. In fact, I have this shot card, and I'm going to share it with people in the full review of 4 targets, 4 or 5 shot group targets at 50 yards. And you can literally see me going through the tune, 880, 870, 860, 850. And as soon as I got to that 850, they all started going in the same dime size hole at 50 yards, where originally I was trying to run at 870, 880. I'd get 3 or 4 in a dime size, and 2 would destabilize and push out to the size of a quarter. So there's just all of it that goes into this, but just pick a regulator pressure, whatever you want, and then try to find a hammer spring tension that works with it, or pick a hammer spring tension and then go to work trying to find a regulator pressure that works with it. And that's all you're doing. You're trying to find those little meet in the middle points to where the gun has harmony, the shot cycle is nice and slick, there's not a lot of waste air, and you just get that nice pellet on pellet, consistency at whatever distance you're trying to shoot at.
Wow. I really like how you wrapped up the whole 2 hours, 20 minutes into that. Because there was a lot that you guys talked about, that we talked about, and I was like taking notes, because I know they're taking notes or doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And to bring it to a final head at the end, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That was good.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What would you
said
say,
a lot.
Adam?
You want to try to bring it together,
No, that was a good
for them.
It's a good way to bring everything together. No, I agree, Pat. Sorry.
Yeah.
We don't want to confuse your audience.
Adam's
that's
choked
We can
up now.
overwhelm them and make them want to give up too, and that's just not what we
You
wanna
choked
do.
up
Tuning
Adam
is
on that.
There's so much beautiful airgun knowledge, He's like,
Yeah.
Adam's gonna break down, he's gonna.
Just don't be afraid. Thank you. Don't be afraid of it. That's all
Yeah.
you're doing. You're just trying to find the balance inside the gun, and you can always undo what you started at. Just write down where you were to begin with. When you got the gun out of the box, I was at this reg pressure, and then count your hammer spring rotations one way or the other till it stops. Write that down too, and you can always get back to where you were.
Yes. And one thing Steve turned me on to back with the original, I remember we were talking about the tuning method that you were going through, because you were like, oh, I'm finding this speed here, this reg pressure, this hammer spring. And and you said something, you're like, well, I can't adjust the reg, down under pressure. And I think you had this, I could hear it, even though you said nothing. I could hear you have this epiphany on the other end of the phone where you were like, I'm just going to start with the reg low and slowly tune up. Right. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's so much less wasting air, right? Because you start with 4350 PSI, you start low on the reg and you work your way up, and start playing with things. And that was like, when you said that, I was like, that's the way you do that.
Point,
yes.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
a lot to that.
Yeah.
There's so many different philosophies to tuning, and if you talk to the guys that are on the podium all the time, they like to run a little bit higher reg pressures, a little bit higher, because that has a tendency to stabilize. You get your tune to where you want it, where you think it looks good, and then just up that reg pressure just a little bit right from there. It has like a stabilizing phenomenon to the whole tune. And, they like to run 110, 120 bar, 130 bar. That to them is high. But I'll never forget a couple of years back when I was able to go to Mariestad, Sweden, and spend time with Fredrik Axelsson, the owner inventor of FX air guns. He kind of bestowed a value on me to where there's really a lot to be said for being able to run a lower reg pressure. And I just took that with me, and I started applying that to everything that I touched, because what you wind up coming away with is a much more docile shooting gun. Not just the efficiency is nice, the accuracy is nice, but you get a shot cycle that's really relaxed and is not so hold sensitive in the PCP, where that tug of war inside the gun isn't a violent action, it's a relaxed harmony between the hammer spring valve and regulator. And then when I first got Tyler's 22 cal Avenger, I wanted to take that knowledge to, to to that tuning approach. And what I always do with every gun, no matter what I get, I throw. If I've heard anything from anyone else, the first thing I like to do is throw that right out the window. And I purposely don't watch YouTube and what other people are doing. I'll get on the forums sometimes and look for information because I don't want to be led down a path that wouldn't necessarily work for me or maybe best for the gun or the audience, because there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. But no matter what now, every gun I approach wanting to try to get away with a really low regulator pressure setting because there's so many benefits to it. PJ Clark is another really good tuner who likes to do the same. And he was actually on the vlog, AEAC vlog, YouTube's AEAC vlog not long ago. And we have a great video talking about the Avenger and the FX and our approaches to tuning. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely check out that video. But then there's other super successful shooters that like to run a higher reg pressure because it works for them. They like that snappy shot cycle, that quick firing cycle. But no matter what, we all have the same objective, which is to get the pellet or slug to the right speed to be stable in the wind. Don't over push it, and don't make the gun work any harder than you need to get to that velocity, because going back to the musket ball and the black powder rifle, that's all waste air emerging around your pellet that really has a tendency to destabilize that pellet or slug. You really want that air coming right up to the end of the barrel, and right when the pellet leaves, it kind of quits. Almost like little tooth. That's kind of the whole art behind the guys and gals that have figured out the accuracy magic have mastered that. And that's really what I try to bring to every tune, to try to just teach that so that everyone at home can have the same success as those that have realized it.
Excellent points. So one thing I want to say is, if our listeners love this type of podcast that we did today with Steve, and if your people at AEAC love this, we're excited. I've learned so much myself in these 2.5 hours. It's amazing. Any final words, Adam?
No, I think we've covered a lot.
That's great. So like always, stay geeky. That's something we do on the end.
Terrible.
All right, hey, you guys, I'm not turning this off quite yet. I just want to remind everybody that if you're watching Airgun Geeks for the first time on YouTube, where to go? They have their own website. You can go to iHeartRadio. You can go to Apple. What do you got? I'm not an Apple guy.
We're on every type of hosting forum out there.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. You can Google Airgun Geeks. You'll find us. You can go to www.airgungeeks.com. You'll find us there, and all of our. How many are we up to now, Adam? How many episodes?
I don't even know off the top of my head
anymore. It's mid-60s now. It's been a lot. So we've been doing this for a little over a year, and we are just having a blast doing it. We're even more excited that you decided to do this with us, Steve. Tyler, taking time out of your busy day to spend time with us and chat with all these air gunners around the world. It's very exciting.
Yeah, you guys have definitely interviewed some cool people and some people that have a lot to share. Now, I'd also like to just real quick, if I could, if you're hearing me for the first time on Airgun Geeks and you want to learn more about my message, I have 2 YouTube channels, AEAC Home and AEAC Vlog. AEAC Vlog is how did I get to the results, and AEAC Home is the results. So we tend to have school on AEAC Vlog on everything I've learned about an air gun and how I got there. And then over on AEAC Home, you'll eventually catch a full review of that air gun, applying all the knowledge that I've learned, shared, and taught on the vlog at 50 and 100 yards, as well as trigger tests, sound tests, refilling, a whole other slew of stuff. You can also catch on that channel coverage of the big shooting competitions around the U.S., the Pyramid Air Cup, the Extreme Bench Rest, the Rocky Mountain Air Gun Challenge. You'll also see factory tour videos from all over the world. We've got one from FX Air Guns in Sweden, JSB Pellets in the Czech Republic, H&N Sport Pellets in Germany. Great factory tour videos if you want to see what that's all about. I've scheduled 2 more factory tour videos for this year in August. Diana Airguns has a brand new facility in Germany that they're very excited to share with you guys. And FX Airguns has like doubled in size since I was there last time. And so they want to bring me back and to do another factory tour video, which is going to be very processed focused, where in the first video we focused, there was a good 30 or 40 minutes of process in there, but that was a lot about getting to know the people behind FX Airguns. This is going to all be about the machinery, the manufacturing process, talking to the people that actually make the stuff and showing what they do every day, as well as wrapping your minds around their great facility. So, as well as lots of crazy airgun reviews and like the Avenger pup. Thank you for letting me review it, by the way.
Absolutely, man. Happy to have you do it.
It's been a journey. So, yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook as well. Hooked on Air on Instagram. If you want to know what I'm doing day to day, I update that hourly. Lots of pictures and tech notes. And Facebook, Hooked on Air, or AEAC, or the Airgun Exploration and Advancement channel. Over there, you'll catch all the press releases and a lot of close-up photo packs of a lot of the project guns that I'm working on.
And you have your own website too, don't you, Steve?
Yeah, AEAC Online, if you guys want to know the bullpen, like, for example, what manufacturers have scheduled a review throughout the year, what's on deck kind of for the next 90 days, you can catch all that over on AEAConline.com. I've also taken some pretty big steps trademarking and copywriting AEAC and the Airgun Exploration and Advancement channel and the Roaring Squirrel that you see at the beginning and end of every video, because I'm very close to starting my own merchandise line of t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, backpacks, water bottles, all this good fun stuff that you'll be able to catch over on AEAConline.com. here hopefully pretty soon. I'm in the final stages of that. It is currently 20 months to trademark anything in the U.S. Patents Office because of the 2-year crazy COVID. I thought I was going to be done with this like a year and a half ago. And just yesterday I was on the phone with the attorneys still trying to get through the final steps of this. So for those of you that have been wanting to know about that, that's what's taking so long.
Wow.
I guess I should probably throw some plugs out there as well, I guess.
Yeah,
Sure.
do it.
If you guys want to see our video content stuff for Pyramid Air on YouTube, do all the Insyder videos. We've been doing some fun interview stuff with Tom Gaylord, the godfather of airguns. Not to timestamp this video, but we've got a bunch more of those coming out as well. And if you are interested in a more interactive experience, also twice a week on Instagram, Tuesdays and Fridays at Pyramid Air, we do Q&As. So you can ask me pretty much anything you want, and as long as it's not too vulgar or too ridiculous, I'm happy to answer you. So check us out over there as well, and the website's www.pyramidair.com for anybody interested in checking out pretty much all things airgun. So,
and that's Pyramid with 2 Y's, just in case.
PYRAMYDAIR.com.
Took me a couple of years to finally.
It's
that
okay
when I was new to this 10 years ago.
if you spell it incorrectly, or correctly technically, it still winds up at the same place. That's if you're new to the business world, one thing you should get used to is buying domain names that are awfully similar to your own, and making sure they redirect to where you want the customers to go. So happy tip there for folks at home.
I just thought of something really important I wanted to add to this. So Tyler Patner, guys, as you've learned today, is the product manager for Air Venturi. He's also the YouTube spokesperson for Pyramid Air over there on Pyramid Air Insyder. He's got his hands on like all sorts of guns. You can't even imagine. He's also a phenomenal professional field target shooter. Very successful. Yeah, no, he's very good. You can follow him on Instagram. And I totally forgot what I was going to say, but it was like super important, and I just forgot again. This is what happens when you go for 2.5 hours and you had a big day out in front of it. Can you guys help me remember what it was I was going to talk about? Oh, wait, there it was. It just came, and I just lost it again. Damn it! Spit some stuff out. Maybe I'll remember it.
Pyramid Air
Domain
domain names.
No.
Product management. Avenger.
No.
Patrick. Adam. Steve.
I can't remember.
Tyler.
Tuning.
Just in case.
Oh, I remembered. So, if I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions specifically for Tyler about your Avenger, because this came out in 2019, if I'm right.
2020.
Yeah, 2020. And so, if you go over to the Airgun Nation forum, you're going to see a sticky topic where people have started amassing questions specifically for Tyler. Tyler and I are going to have our own vlog video on YouTube's AEAC home after I finish the full review. So that's going to be probably in 2 or 3 weeks from now, where we're going to, or he or we are going to answer all of the specific questions you guys have had for us over there on the Airgun Nation forum, or for him. So if you want to be able to funnel that, get that in front of us so that we can answer that question for you on YouTube, that's where you go to ask your question.
Awesome.
Great.
That was
plug.
important. It was
That's very important.
That's a
I didn't
fart in the
strong
wind.
plug.
I don't know where it went, but I thank God we got it back.
It was a slippery fish.
Now
It
there's some good questions on there already, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep. And if you want to learn more about the 22, I've done a full tuning guide on it, as well as a full review. The tuning guide on the 22 cal from 2020 is on this channel, AEAC Vlog. The full review is on the other YouTube channel, AEAC Home. That's all I got officially. I'm out. Over and out.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
Steve, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Tyler, thank you so much for taking so much time out of your day. Are we going to try this again, Patrick?
Sure.
All right. So, and like always,
Stay
geeky.
That's horrible.
God bless it.
Whatever.
You want to do it? You want to do it again?
No.
Yeah,
let's do it again.
we did the opening. How many
We'll all
times?
do it at the same time.
One more time, guys.
Hey.
Or I'm going to find a reason to keep talking about airguns.
Patrick, you're on video. You can count down with your hands. I'm just
All
saying.
right. There he is. All right. Here we go. So on 3. 1, 2, 3. Stay geeky.
Good. Thanks, guys.
That's
and I'll see you the third Wednesday of every month.
Love it. Adios.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
No problem.
Take care,
Nice
guys.
to see you, T. Thanks, Patrick.
You too.
Thanks, Adam.